Throughout history, you will notice a pattern over the past 500 years. This pattern has destroyed three major superpowers. And now in 2025, the United States is also following the same pattern step by step. It's as if we are reading the same script. And this script once led former superpowers to disaster. In 1590, Spain was the wealthiest empire in the world. It controlled half of the world's gold and silver. All of Europe was under its sway. Its currency was accepted everywhere. But just 80 years later, it went bankrupt and never regained its former glory. In 1914, Britain was the largest empire in human history by territory. The so-called empire on which the sun never set referred to it. The British pound was the world's reserve currency. Yet this vast empire came to an end in just 40 years. In 1991, the Soviet Union was a superpower. It possessed nuclear weapons, global influence and satellites across the world. But all of this vanished in just 900 days. It wasn't due to any war, but was caused by economic collapse. So these three superpowers all collapsed in the same way. And what comes next might terrify you. The United States has completed 5 out of 7 stages. It is following exactly the same path as the former superpowers. Today's video will show you how superpowers fall, why every superpower believes it is exceptional, and why, according to the data, it is now America's turn. Before understanding this pattern, you need to grasp what an empire's collapse really is. Not the definition in books, but the reality on the ground. What does the destruction of a superpower mean? An empire's collapse does not start with war or military defeat. It begins with economic exhaustion. A superpower expands beyond its ability to sustain itself. It maintains military bases in 150 countries, stations troops on multiple fronts, makes promises it cannot keep. But behind the scenes, a major shift is occurring. Resources are misallocated. Productive capacity shrinks. Elite talent leaves the country. Then the decline accelerates. Your allies begin to shift allegiance. Enemies start testing your limits. The reserve currency status begins to wobble. Suddenly, the very advantages that once made you powerful become weaknesses. The currency once sought by everyone starts flowing back home. The global military presence becomes unsustainable. The promises that once signaled strength become empty slogans. This is not textbook theory. This is what actually happened to Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. They ended up that way because they made the exact same decisions the United States is making today. America believes its hegemony is permanent. It won't accept reality until the collapse reaches its peak. Now let's see how this played out 3 times. Starting with Spain. After Columbus discovered America in 1492, Spain became the first superpower. It conquered the Aztec and Inca empires, seized the world's largest gold and silver mines at the time. Starting in 1550, Spanish ships delivered 200 tons of silver annually to the homeland. By 1600, that number doubled, reaching 400 tons. Spain controlled the money flow across Europe. The Spanish real was the global reserve currency. Everyone had to use Spanish silver. And the pattern begins when a country controls the currency. It starts believing it is invincible. Philip II, who reigned from 1556 to 1598, was the world's wealthiest monarch at the time. He controlled all the wealth of the Spanish Empire. Yet he made fatal decisions. Stage 1. Military overextension. Spain waged wars everywhere. Fought the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean. Clashed with France and Italy in Europe. Suppressed the Calvinist revolt in the Netherlands. Fought the British Navy. And was involved in the Philippines and the Americas. By 1580, Spanish armies were spread across 4 continents. Expenses were staggeringly high. Half of all revenue went to the military. Yet it still wasn't enough. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The Spanish government couldn't pay its debts with taxes alone. So it made the choice common to all fallen empires. It diluted its silver coins with copper. Originally pure silver coins were first diluted with 50% copper. Later increased to 75%. The face value remained the same. The real value plummeted. By 1600, Spanish coins contained almost no silver. Merchants stopped accepting this currency. Inflation soared dramatically. Stage 3. Debt death spiral. Spain began borrowing from Italian bankers, German bankers, and anyone willing to lend. In 1557, during Philip II's reign, Spain declared bankruptcy in less than a year. Unable to repay debts, it kept borrowing and spending. In 1560, 1575, and 1596, 4 times in 40 years, Spain went bankrupt. Each time it promised reform, but each time it repeated the cycle. Continued borrowing. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. This is something the Spanish completely failed to see. When you have endless wealth, you stop producing. Why farm if you can import? Why build ships if you can buy them? Why innovate if money can solve everything? Spain's elite viewed all manual labor as beneath them. This led to manufacturing collapse. Agricultural stagnation. All wealth was spent importing goods from abroad. Gold and silver from the Americas were used to buy French wine. Italian silk. Money flowed through Spain, but left no value behind. By 1600, Spain produced almost nothing and relied entirely on imports. And when the silver mines' output began to decline, and eventually ran dry, the whole system collapsed. Stage 5, societal collapse. As the economy declined, crime rates rose. The streets of Madrid filled with beggars. Productive people began emigrating. The best talent flowed to France, Britain, and the Netherlands. These countries were thriving. Spain was left with bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests. No one was creating wealth. Everyone was consuming. In 1640, Spain lost Portugal. In 1650, it lost the Netherlands. By 1700, the Spanish Empire was a hollow shell, a dead economic giant on the map. This former superpower declined in less than a century, and never recovered. Today's Spain is a culturally rich but globally insignificant European country. Its former conquest forts are now just tourist attractions. This is the fall of an empire. Fast forward 300 years. To Britain in 1900. The empire on which the sun never set occupied 25% of the world's land area at its peak. Ruled over 400 million people. The pound was the global reserve currency. All major trade contracts were settled in pounds. Central banks held British government bonds. London was the world's financial center. Just like Spain 300 years earlier. Britain believed this would last forever. But it was already on the same trajectory. Stage 1, military overextension. In 1900, British influence spanned the globe: India, Africa, the Middle East, the Pacific, the Caribbean. Its military was deployed across 6 continents. The cost was enormous. When World War I broke out in 1914, Britain had 2 choices: stay neutral and watch Europe collapse, or enter the war and win at the cost of bankruptcy. It chose the latter. World War I cost Britain $40 billion, equivalent to $1 trillion today. It borrowed from everyone, mostly from the United States. By 1918, Britain went from a creditor to a debtor nation. But it won the war. Stage 2, currency devaluation. The pound was originally backed by gold. But the war drained Britain's gold reserves. To obtain food and supplies, Britain shipped gold to America. By 1920, Britain's gold reserves were half of what they were in 1914. Yet it still tried to maintain the pound's value. In 1925, Britain returned to the pre-war gold standard. But the problem was, the pound's exchange rate was set too high. This made British exports expensive. Manufacturing declined. Unemployment rose. To maintain currency value, the government had to keep interest rates high. This further devastated the domestic economy. By 1931, Britain could no longer hold on. It abandoned the gold standard. The pound lost 25% of its value overnight. Stage 3, debt spiral. Before Britain could recover from World War I, World War II broke out. The war cost $120 billion. Britain again borrowed heavily from the United States. By 1945, Britain owed over $30 billion to the US and Canada. More than Britain's GDP at the time. Britain won the war. But the empire was finished. It could no longer sustain it. Nor afford it. Stage 4, imperial dissolution. In 1947, Britain lost India. its pride, and its most profitable colony of the past 2 centuries. Over the next 20 years, Britain lost everything. By 1970, the British Empire existed only in history books. Stage 5, currency status collapse. The pound kept falling. In 1940, £1 equaled $4.03. In 1950, it was $2.80. In 1970, $2.40. By 1980, it fell to $2.30. Today it's just $1.27. The global reserve currency became a regional currency. Britain tried to maintain status through its UN Security Council seat. Nuclear weapons. And its special relationship with the US. But everyone knows the truth. It is now a faded star without power. A museum of lost glory. The British Empire fell. Now let's look at the most recent example. The Soviet Union from 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the Soviet Union rose as a superpower, possessing nuclear weapons, controlling Eastern Europe, holding vast global influence, and having satellites in space. The Soviet Union believed it was the future, that communism would replace and bury capitalism. For 45 years, the Soviet Union rivaled the United States, militarily comparable to the US. More tanks, more missiles, more troops. But behind the scenes, its economy was collapsing. Stage 1, military overextension. The Soviet Union spent 15 to 20% of its GDP on the military. 3 times more than the US. To match US technology, global influence, and alliance systems, the Soviet Union intervened in Afghanistan, Cuba, Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, and Ethiopia. Wherever US influence reached, the Soviet Union had to follow. The cost of all this was unsustainable. Stage 2, economic stagnation. In the 1970s, the Soviet economy stopped growing. Oil revenues had helped sustain it. But everything else was failing. By 1980, the Soviet Union even needed to import grain. The country with the world's most fertile land could not feed itself. Why? The failure of central planning. Innovation died under control. Without incentives, no one wanted to produce. The ruble never became a true international currency. It was not freely convertible internationally. Even Soviet citizens didn't trust it. They often used dollars on the black market. The government had to buy imports with gold and oil, because no one wanted rubles. In 1985, oil prices fell. The Soviet Union's gold reserves were quickly depleted. There was no real currency circulating domestically. Stage 4, imperial dissolution. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. In 1990, Eastern Europe broke away from Soviet control. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, almost all left within a year. The satellite states that once provided strategic depth for the Soviet Union vanished. The Soviet government was powerless to stop it. The state treasury was empty. Stage 5, total collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. From the fall of the Berlin Wall to total collapse, it took just 900 days. No invasion. No war. Simply due to economic crisis. The military couldn't be paid. The government couldn't function. The ruble became worthless. This superpower with 30.000 nuclear weapons fell because of internal economic failure. The pattern is identical. Overextension, currency collapse, debt spiral, imperial dissolution, and finally, total collapse. The United States is following this pattern exactly. Step by step. Let me show you the specifics. Stage 1, military overextension. The US has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. Troops are deployed in 150 nations. It defends Europe through NATO, protects Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, fights in the Middle East, and counters Russia. The front lines are too stretched. The US military budget is $850 billion. More than the next 10 countries combined. But US weapons are aging. Military recruitment is low. And it has made promises it cannot keep. If Russia enters NATO territory, If Iran blocks the Persian Gulf. The US cannot handle all these scenarios at once. The US is carrying an excessive burden. Just like Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union did. Stage 2, currency devaluation. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar became a pure fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has increased by 400%. Since 2020, the US has printed over $6 trillion. Since 1971, the dollar has lost 98% of its value. Purchasing power has evaporated. The US didn't dilute silver with copper like Spain. Instead, it prints money without limits. The mechanism is different, but the outcome is the same. The essence is identical. Stage 3, debt death spiral. US debt stands at $36 trillion. That's 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone cost $1 trillion annually. Interest expenses now exceed defense spending. The US economy runs on perpetual deficits. The 2024 deficit reached $1.8 trillion. To repay old debt, the US must continuously borrow new debt. This is the core definition of a debt death spiral. Historically, Spain defaulted 4 times. Britain borrowed until the empire fell. The Soviet Union exhausted all wealth before dissolving. And the US is now repeating their mistakes. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Today's US is addicted to speculation and consumption. Consuming without producing. The manufacturing base has vanished. It moved to China, Mexico, and Vietnam. The US imports over $800 billion in goods annually. Almost everything relies on imports: medicine, electronics, steel, even components for military equipment. Just like Spain relied on imports while silver flowed out, the US relies on imports. Dollars are flowing out. Stage 5, societal collapse. Americans' trust in institutions is at historic lows. Crime is rising. Homelessness is surging. 100,000 Americans die from drug overdoses each year. Elite talent is leaving the US for other countries. Birth rates are falling. Political chaos is evident. Americans cannot agree on anything. Cannot fix anything. Cannot build anything for themselves. Signs of collapse are everywhere. But everyone pretends everything is fine. It is not. The US has entered stage 5. And the Soviet Union collapsed quickly after entering stage 5. Britain and Spain went through similar stages. The pattern never changes. Stage 6, loss of reserve currency status. When your neighbors start diversifying. When trade shifts to other currencies. When dollars start flowing back because people no longer want to hold them. We are already seeing these signs. BRICS nations are developing alternative currencies. Central banks are buying gold. China and Russia are trading in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan for oil. The situation is very fragile. Stage 7, total collapse. This is not a gradual decline. It is a sudden, total collapse. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Britain lost its empire in 20 years. Spain took a bit longer. But the result is the same. When the reserve currency collapses, borrowing becomes impossible. When the military cannot be funded, the collapse will not be graceful. It will come quickly and brutally. Every superpower believes it won't happen to them. Makes the same mistakes as other empires. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union, and the US all believed they were exceptional. All believed the rules didn't apply to them. But they were always wrong. You cannot spend beyond your means. Without productive capacity, you cannot sustain an empire. You cannot print money endlessly without consequences. A currency cannot devalue forever. Once stages 1 through 5 are complete, stages 6 and 7 are unavoidable. The sequence is predetermined. Only the timing is uncertain. The US might have 10 years, 5 years, or even less. But the pattern suggests collapse will come. And it won't be slow. It will happen suddenly. This is today's video. If you liked it, please help by going to the Douyin Jingxuan app, clicking the recommend thumbs up button at the bottom right, and letting more people learn from history.